Our Sabbath. In the beginning, when God finished creating the world, He rested on the seventh day. This is the Sabbath or Shabbat in the Hebrew dialect. The Sabbath symbolized rest. In the Old Testament, the Sabbath was the weekly remembrance of God's creative work as seen in Exodus 20 verse 11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. This has its own origin from Genesis 2 verse 3, where God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it because in it He rested from all His work which God had created and made. The Sabbath was also a remembrance of God's redeeming work as seen in Deuteronomy 5 verse 15, which says, "You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath day." So we see that both Genesis and Exodus are remembered every Sabbath. These are God's greatest works in time, space, and matter. In Genesis, He rested after creation. In Exodus, He rested after redeeming the created creature. When we study the New Testament, we see that the Old Testament creation and redemption finds fulfillment in Jesus. Having finished all His work of redeeming the world, having completed His recreation of humanity, He rested in the tomb of death on the seventh day. When He shouted, "It is finished," His work was finished, thus He took His rest. This was His Sabbath. Hebrews 4 verse 9 to 11. So there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For the one who has entered His rest has himself also rested from his works, as God did from His. Therefore, let us be diligent to enter that rest, so that no one will fall through following the same example of disobedience. Mark 2 verse 27 to 28. Jesus said to them, "The Sabbath was made for men, and not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Moreover, Jesus didn't just observe the Sabbath, but was Lord of the Sabbath. He was the rest that nature and mankind has been longing for since the day of creation. His resurrection ushers us into the Sabbath that creation has been awaiting since Genesis. Matthew 11 verse 28. We who are weak and heavy laden come to Jesus, and He sabbathed us in Himself. In Mark 11 verse 28, He summoned us, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." This meant that Sabbath has ceased to be a day because Jesus was saying He will sabbath us in Himself. He took a Sabbath in the tomb on our behalf, thus ensuring an eternal rest in Himself, which will ultimately take place at His second coming. There await an eternal rest for those who have entered the rest in His lifetime. Hebrews 4 verse 1 says, "Therefore, let us fear if, while a promise remains of entering His rest, any one of you may seem to have come short of it." Revelation 14 verse 30. "And I heard a voice from heaven saying, Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, so that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds will follow them."